mine. Well, let's get some reaction to the story as it continues, and I'm joined now by Giwusa, the union's president, who's joining me in the studio. Good to have you, and thank you very much for your time, Mametlwe Sebei. The site that we are talking about, it seems in 1978 was a site of tragedy. And some of the recollections there by the ex-miners of how dangerous this particular shaft could have been, where 4 teams would have come to their demise and they were never really retrieved from below the ground. Is there, in your view, a legal, safe, sustainable solution that will lead to an amicable solution to what is going on there without a similar tragedy recurring?
Well, at least that solution needs to be explored. Now, whether it will be found is a different issue. What is happening is that government has not even been willing to have that conversation. The mining industry is not willing to have that conversation. What the mining industry does is to simply abandon this mine, and with it, their obligations in terms of environmental management to ensure that the sites are properly closed, sealed, environment and the land adequately rehabilitated for alternative, productive uses. But also they abandon the mine workers and their families and communities without jobs, without alternative skills, but also in a situation wherein the entire industry is built on colonial mining, basically. I mean, it's a colonial extractivism, and I think this is a point we need to underline. Where you have the mining industry that see this whole country as, a geological formation from which they will only access the minerals, ship them off raw as they are, without any form of beneficiation, that will otherwise establish alternative industries, build resilient local economies that can be able to sustain this economy, these economies and these communities post-mining. Yeah. And that's the reason that when the mine closes, it's a disastrous situation, but also an incentive why these companies abandon instead of properly closing the mines. Yeah.
Because so do you believe if they're properly closed, I suppose the people will abandon the idea of wanting to go back there and excavate? Because they, as you put it, without alternatives to the mining, if you leave those communities in poverty, they are calling for the reopening of these mines because they still believe there's substance there. Are they not going to continue to, in some informal way, want to dig through and get what they believe is some value?
Thabo, that is almost unavoidable, unfortunately, because, and I think this is what South Africans need to think about. Me and you have had conversations around the cost of living in this country, where when you look at the household food basket, doesn't match the income levels for those that are on social grants, let alone those that are not even having income, but also 60% of the workers on minimum wages. One shop steward of ours, Comrade Peter, asked me in the Congress, Sebei, is government even aware that their numbers don't match? And when I asked what do you mean by that, he said to me, well, the household food basket is in excess of our wages. Yeah. The cost of electricity, the cost of housing, the cost of transport, every single report shows that the income levels of the working class in this country are falling short, well below the cost of survival. And what are you having? Is levels of poverty that are translated today into starvation and hunger. And Thabo, the conversation that we are trying to have there is trying to convince a man, right, whose child doesn't have a food to eat as of that very day, hasn't ate a day before, that look, this is very dangerous. I mean, I went to Stilfontein yesterday. I looked at that hole. Just on looking down there, I felt dizzy because you're talking about 2 kilometers of a hole that I can't even see how it ends. And I ask, how could even any person put themselves going down there
without proper equipment? Said, because the equipment.
And somebody said to me, this man's families don't have food to eat. They see their children starving. 50% of the children in this country are starving, malnutrition, and experiencing a standard growth. So the alternatives that you are having and that we are presenting to these people is either this situation or what you had in Eastern Cape, where majority of them, by the way, are coming from, where a woman killed herself and ate of her children, right? And people need to start saying, are we saying that woman is a model of a good, coping strategy with the hunger and starvation in this country? Or are we reckoning with the fact that you have people in former mining or distressed mining towns with closure, where there is gold, some of which is still there? It may not be profitable for the mining companies to mine, but these workers are trying to eke out a living there. And what then could happen is that government could regulate. More than regulating, government could provide support by way of capital and access to market.
I want us to talk a little bit more about that support and whether government is ready or if there's a political will for that kind of conversation. That is this feature now of the industry that is beginning to emerge, especially in the mining towns. We'll continue with the president of Giwusa, Mametlwe Sebei, on the other side of this statement. Back on the Newsfeed PM, let's continue our conversation on the Northwest operations there. Illegal mining, if you want, with the General Industries Workers Union of South Africa President Mametlwe Sebei. Let's talk about this idea of government's intervention and support in this particular feature, which is artisanal mining, really, but of course we prefer to call it illegal mining at this particular point because it's not regulated and it's happening in a space that endangers the lives of people. Is government ready to deal with that? When we speak of government, we always say, hey, these folks, because maybe the ministers are old, they don't have political will. Others say, no, there's just no creativity in how they are approaching this thing of the economy. Is there nobody who's sitting in the Department of Mineral Resources and Energy saying, look, there is a 21 billion rands, I believe, industry here. Some 30,000 people are participating in this informally. Let's formalize this. Why is nobody having that conversation?
Well, it is because this is a government that is committed and serving at the behest of big mining monopolies, predominantly foreign-owned multinational companies that have monopolized the industry. Reality is, Thabo, most of these mineral resources, let's be clear about it, end up with these very corporations. Because, tell me this, how does this extremely poor, right? Many of them dehydrated, emaciated mine workers that you saw coming from underground, how do they transport these minerals, right, from these mines all the way to the ports and from the port to the outside of the country without, at the very minimum, the cooperation of the police, the cooperation of politicians who work with the police, but also how do they trade internationally when this industry is so regulated that you can't sell many of these minerals without a necessary license and certificate to trade.
So they're able to make their ways into the formal spaces where there are mining companies that trade with these. There is the black market, of course, that would trade with these, and they are international illicit syndicates, if you like.
And this is just, remember, part of a bigger problem of illicit trading on minerals that, by the way, is committed on an industrial scale, right? On an industrial scale by the formal mining companies. Because the discussions we're having all the time, when we speak about illegality, we speak about people, not the conduct. Illegal mining is any mining activity that takes place outside the framework of the law. So you may very well be licensed, but when you don't comply with your environmental management plans, when you don't comply with your SLP, when you manipulate records in such a way that you are able, for instance, to invoice, right, a mineral's worth 300 billion, 400 billion to your subsidiary in London so that you are able to avoid tax, to avoid wage increase for the workers, to avoid your social commitment to communities. And this is reflected by the staggering figures that are given by report compiled by United Nations that shows that mining companies are declaring only 1/3 of the minerals they are taking out of this country. Some researchers have said that actually the level of illicit financial flows going out of this country are as much as 20% of the GDP in this country. That is hundreds of billions of rands you need to eliminate unemployment, poverty, and also all these problems. Now, the reality is, even if you to accept the reports of what they declare, last year alone, Mineral Council said their whole industry, their turnover was 1.1 trillion rand, right? The turnover of the entire industry. Now, of that, the primary sales made 782 billion rand, right? They paid 160 billion in all forms of tax, and they paid 180 on wages. They spent only 4.9 billion on community development. Just think about it. You take minerals from the people's land with their labor worth 1.1 trillion rand, spend less than 5 billion on them. How is that even justice? Yeah. And this government is allowing it. They're allowing it because the ANC is no longer in the service, just in the service of the capitalist class. They themselves are part of it. You have a president in this country who is a billionaire and very much part of that billionaire class of the mining capitalists who are looting and plundering the mineral resources and the labor and the land of this country, alongside the multinational corporations that have monopolized the ownership of the key sectors of the economy, minerals, and the land in the country.
So the government has got a court case, and they're going on to this thing on Tuesday with the protectors of the Constitution, who are taking them to court about how they're handling of this matter. And I suppose, I mean, we are speculating, we don't know what they'll be arguing, but part of what the cabinet has been saying is that government is not going to support criminality. So they're going to say that's criminality, that's illegality. So we're not going to support that. Is that the right way to approach it?
Well, it's a problem, and I'll tell you why. There are two levels, and it's linked to your earlier questions about lack of government support. So many of these, so the idea that these 30 to 40,000 of these artisanal miners, all of them are criminal gangs. I mean, which gangster is that? There's no such a gangster. What you have is overwhelming majority of disparate, mainly former mine workers, their families and communities who are forced to eke out a living in these horrific conditions, right? And then because of lack of access to capital and the markets, and government not willing to regulate, but also to support that, then the organized criminal syndicates, right, enter the space and fill the vacuum. And what concerns South Africans about this industry is the horrific stories of violence, of rapes, of murders. What is happening here is that you have these organized criminal syndicates who are asserting themselves in order to seize the monopoly over a trading on these minerals that are actually mined by these artisanal miners, and they want to be able to monopolize and be able to profit, to profit from a trading on them. And what they then do, they unleash reign of terror, first and foremost, on this the artisanal miners themselves, their families, their communities, and the rape, the murders is just weaponization of that reign of terror in order to get them to toe the line. That is to say, to hand over all the gold that they mine so that they engage and integrate and process that into illicit trading on minerals.
But then how do you intervene there where you've got communities that are divided on this, right? There are communities who are saying these people are terrorizing us, they're raping our kids and so on and so forth. Not only that, they're running underground in our homes, they are causing cracks, they're destroying our properties and so on and so forth. So police must deal with these people, right? On the other hand, you've got communities that say, no, these are our children. We haven't eaten in 3 months. They are going down there and they are trying to hack out a living for us. How do those communities exist together?
That's the thing. We are the one that have been raising that issue to say this industry is becoming extremely dangerous for communities, for many families in these areas. And in fact, I was here just about 3 years ago where we released a report on the state of mine closures, right? And what we said is that unless government intervene to regulate the industry, what does it do? Once you criminalize activity like this, obviously it becomes a haven for organized criminality, which is a reality nobody can dispute. Well, that's what concerns the communities. You know, the violence, the crime, right? That is what needs to be dealt with. And how do you deal with that? You deal with that in a way that you then say, as government now, these mine workers are obviously just salvaging, right, a gold that otherwise lies there, nobody's interested in it because it's no longer profitable for the big mining companies. You provide them with an equipment to ensure that they do this work in a very safe and healthy manner, but also they are able to earn a decent livelihoods for themselves, their families, and sustain their communities. And by then providing the market, and I mean, we have history of this, right? During apartheid, I mean, government had cooperatives for small, farmers, right? Where they sell their produce and so on. Yeah. Government establishing cooperatives like that, then they regulate access to the market so that a poor, disparate, artisanal miner doesn't have to worry about how do I get this gold to London. But
you know as well as I do that government does not even have a good track record of handling CPAs in agriculture. You want CPAs in mining. How disastrous that is going to be.
But the alternative is, the alternative is that the organized syndicates that are terrorizing our communities are going to continue, right, to fill that vacuum unless government actually enters it. Because these are the people that have the access to the capital, that have the access to the networks of illicit trading on minerals. Yeah. Lots of these disparate people don't. And if you want to end the violence, the crime that concern our communities, that concern all of us, I mean, I have 2 daughters. The idea that they can be the organized criminal syndicates that are roaming and terrorizing our communities, raping our kids, raping our sisters and other things and so on, murdering us and, our brothers, and, I can't accept that, right? The issue is, how do we find a solution? And the solution is very simple. Government reports themselves, by the way, have recommended regulation. They are just taking their time, right? This community, I'll give you an example. They actually have the NPO that they've registered. They've been given 1 mine dump by one of the companies. I met their lawyer, and they are saying, no. If government actually can just expedite this whole thing, give them that whole mine area, because none of these mines are still interested, right? Support them. Then overnight, you can have lots of this regulated, 2, legalized, but most importantly, you would make it impossible for a lot of these criminals and organized syndicates to be able to parasite and ruthlessly exploit many disparate people who just want to make an honest living and to feed their families that are starving and hungry.